Echo of a Lost Hero, the secret bond between a disabled girl and a vanished police dog. Long before the school bus rattled down Sycamore Street, rivers of fog coursed along the gutters, muffling every sound except the soft tap-drag of Erin's crutch. She counted each click to steady her nerves, 1, 2, 3, until the alley swallowed her in shadow. There, crouched like a displaced monument, loomed the dog, enormous, battle-scarred, and heartbreakingly thin. She'd named him Echo, though he wore no collar to prove he'd ever belonged anywhere. Still, his posture was too disciplined, his gaze too calculating for an ordinary stray. As Erin knelt, Echo inched forward and took the bread from her trembling fingers with surgical gentleness. But before gratitude could settle, headlights washed across the brick wall. A black sedan crawled past, driver craning his neck as if searching for something or someone. Echo's hackles lifted, muscles tensing into lines Erin didn't know dogs possessed. In that fleeting glare she saw it. Faded, tattooed numbers on his ear, the kind police canines bear. Why would a decorated service dog lurk in a back alley? And why had he chosen her as his only confidant? The answer would unravel a tragedy, ignite a miracle, and transform every life that touched them. The world was still half asleep when Erin pushed open the back door. It gave a familiar creak, sharp, splintered, the kind that always made her wince, as if the sound itself could betray her. She paused, her small hand lingering on the peeling wood, listening for the telltale rustle of her grandmother's slippers from the hallway. But the silence held. The old clock on the kitchen wall ticked faintly, counting her defiance in seconds. She exhaled a slow breath and stepped out into the dawn mist. The early morning air wrapped around her like a thin shroud, damp, cool, and tinged with the earthy scent of wet leaves and concrete that hadn't yet shrugged off the night. A soft fog hovered over the little houses of Sycamore Street, casting them in a dreamy hush. The lamplight hadn't shut off yet, their halos glowing dim above parked cars and crooked fences. It was in this stillness, this fragile in-between, that she moved. Her crutch tapped quietly on the stone steps. Click, thud, click, thud. Her other hand clutched a napkin-wrapped bundle, a slice of bread with a thin smear of butter and the crusts trimmed off, exactly how she liked it. Only this wasn't for her. Erin wasn't sure when this had become routine. Maybe the first time she saw him, the large shadow at the end of the alley, coiled in the space between fear and memory. He hadn't moved then, just stared at her with eyes that didn't look feral, only lost. Maybe it started that morning, or maybe it started long before, when the kids at school began calling her names, when her crutch made her different, when even her silence felt too loud in the house with her grandmother, who rarely smiled anymore. She turned into the narrow alley behind the house where cracked bricks and twisted ivy ran along the back fences. The world here was colder, quieter. Her heartbeat quickened, as it always did, not from fear, but anticipation. The alley held a kind of sacredness now. This was their place, their morning chapel. And there, just past the collapsed recycling bin and the dented mailbox no one claimed anymore, he waited. He was more silhouette than creature at first, large, unmoving, half-draped in the fog and shadow. His ears were alert, his body low but not aggressive. Always the same pose, always that noble stillness. His fur looked even more tangled today, streaked with mud from last night's rain. There were leaves caught near his flank and a tear along one of his ears that hadn't healed right. His ribs were faint outlines beneath a thick coat, and his eyes, gold, sharp, tired, watched her approach with something more than hunger, something like recognition. "Hi, Rox," she whispered, almost reverently. She didn't know where the name came from. It just felt right. It sounded strong, like a knight's name, or the kind of name a dog like him would carry into battle and never drop. He didn't move. Erin took another slow step. The gravel crunched under her shoe. She lowered herself onto the turned-over crate that had become her altar of sorts, wincing slightly as her leg complained. The pain was dull today, more like an echo than a shout. She balanced the crutch against her shoulder and held the bread out in her open palm. For a long moment, nothing happened. Rock stayed in shadow, his breath misting in the cold. But then, like clockwork, he moved. He approached with slow, deliberate steps. One paw, then another, silent and sure like a soldier crossing enemy lines. His eyes never left hers. She felt small under his gaze, not in a frightened way, in the way a child might feel standing before a mountain or a secret. When he reached her hand, he didn't snatch the bread or lunge. He simply leaned forward, teeth grazing nothing but air, and took the food as if he understood what it meant. A peace offering, a promise. His nose brushed her fingers gently as he pulled the slice away. The warmth of his breath lingered for a second. Then he sat, just beside her, not touching, but near enough that she could feel the space between them shrink. Erin smiled. "You're always so polite," she said softly. Rox didn't wag his tail. Not much. But there was a flick, slight, brief, as if he were answering her without words. The fog clung to the alley as they sat in silence. The first bird calls began in the trees behind the houses. The smell of brewing coffee drifted faintly from a neighbor's window. Somewhere, a screen door banged open and closed. The world was waking up, but here, in this pocket of forgotten space behind the world, Erin and Rox simply existed. She didn't know where he came from, and he never asked her why she walked with a crutch. There was no judgment in his eyes, no pity, just presence. And that, to Erin, was worth more than any kind of miracle. She reached out carefully, letting her fingers hover inches from his thick fur, not daring to touch yet. "You're not like other strays," she whispered. "You're not even really a stray, are you?" Rox blinked slowly, then turned his head just slightly toward the end of the alley. Alert. Erin followed his gaze, frowning. Then she heard it too. The shuffling, the shoes on gravel, the voice. "Hey, Erin McKay," came the sharp tone. "Are you feeding that dog again?" "Mrs. Jensen." Erin stiffened. Rox backed away instantly, like a shadow dissolving into shadow, disappearing behind the stacked pallets. Mrs. Jensen, wearing her usual fleece robe and armed with a half-empty mug of coffee, stood at the edge of her backyard fence, glaring through the gaps. "You know he's dangerous, right? You want to get bitten and end up in the ER?" "He's not dangerous." Erin's voice cracked before she meant it to. She scrambled up, using her crutch, heart pounding. Mrs. Jensen shook her head, muttering something about irresponsible parenting. But it wasn't her judgment that hurt. It was the voice that followed, quiet but firm, from behind Erin. "Erin?" Her grandmother. Erin froze. She turned slowly. Grandma stood at the back steps, arms crossed, disappointment etched deep into her weary face. "We'll talk inside," was all she said. And Erin knew. The ritual had been discovered. He was there again. Erin felt it before she saw him, some invisible pull in the air, like the hush that falls over the world when something sacred steps into it. The alley was darker than usual that morning, the fog sitting heavier against the cracked pavement, curling around her ankles like a living thing. But even through the mist, she sensed his presence. Her hand tightened slightly around the napkin-wrapped slice of bread. She stepped forward, her crutch tapping gently against the ground. The alley narrowed ahead, swallowed by low-hanging ivy and the broken silhouettes of backyard fences. And then she saw him. Rocks. He emerged from the shadows, not like a stray, but like something older, something carved from time and memory. He was sitting in the same spot he always chose, just beneath the rusted drainpipe at the back of the abandoned storage shed. His body was still, unnaturally still. Not out of fear, but out of calculation, discipline. His ears were pricked, his golden eyes alert. There was power in the quietness of him. His coat, once thick and probably beautiful, was now streaked with dirt and leaves. A small scar ran beneath his left eye, barely visible under the grime. His ribs showed slightly, like shadows beneath fur too long unbrushed. Yet nothing about him screamed stray. He wasn't broken. He wasn't begging. He simply was. And somehow, to Aaron, that was more powerful than words. "Hi, boy," she whispered, barely audible. The wind moved through the alley, lifting the hem of her hoodie. Rox didn't flinch. He just stared at her, calm but watchful, the way sentinels once watched over castles. There was something ancient in the way he held himself, something unchanged by weather, hunger, or time. Erin took a slow breath and limped forward. With every step, her heart beat louder in her ears. Not because she was afraid, never that. Rox had never given her a reason to be scared. It was something else, something she didn't know how to name. Like the feeling of holding your breath before touching water, like standing in a moment that could disappear if you moved too quickly. She reached the overturned crate and sat down with care. Her crutch leaned against her shoulder. Her leg throbbed, but she didn't mind. Not when he was here, not when they were both exactly where they needed to be. "I brought the soft bread today," she said, her voice light. "The one with butter. Not much. Grandma gets mad when I waste, but I thought maybe you'd like it better." She slowly unwrapped the napkin. The bread was warm from her hand. She extended it with care, her arm outstretched and still. For a moment nothing happened. Then, as if some invisible thread had been pulled, Rox moved. Not quickly, not hungrily. Each step was slow, fluid, purposeful-like, a memory replaying itself in real time. His eyes never left hers. He crossed the short space between them with a grace that felt out of place in this world of dumpsters and cracked brick walls. His pause made no sound. Only the faint rustle of loose gravel marked his passage. And when he reached her hand, he didn't lunge. He didn't snatch. Instead, Rox leaned in, head lowered, breath warm. His nose hovered just a breath away from her palm. Then, gently, reverently, he took the bread. His teeth brushed nothing but air. His mouth closed around the food with such care that it made Erin's throat tighten. It wasn't just hunger. It was trust. She exhaled shakily. Her eyes stung, and she blinked fast. It was ridiculous, she told herself, to get emotional over a piece of bread. But it wasn't the bread. It was how he took it. Like it mattered. Like she mattered. "You're always so careful," she whispered, watching him chew. Rox didn't make a sound. He sat down in front of her, tail sweeping once across the ground. A single, small gesture, but for Erin, it was enough. No one had ever told her she was enough just by being still, by existing. But Rox made her believe it. He licked his lips when he finished, then looked up at her again, not expectantly, not begging, just present. And in that gaze, Erin felt something in her settle, something she didn't know had been unsteady until now. She set the napkin aside and rested her arms on her knees, leaning forward slightly. "I had a bad dream last night," she murmured. "There was water everywhere. I couldn't run. My crutch kept slipping. And I think I heard someone calling for me, but when I turned, no one was there." Rox tilted his head just slightly. One ear flicked. She smiled. "You probably don't care about dreams." He didn't move, but the silence between them wasn't empty. It felt full of breath, of understanding. Erin looked down at her leg. "Sometimes I think the kids at school see my crutch before they see me." She looked up again, more vulnerable now. "You don't do that. You look at me like I'm just a girl. Not broken, just me." There was a long pause. Then, so subtly she almost missed it, Rox let out a quiet exhale. Not a sigh. More like a breath let go after holding it for too long. And in that moment, Erin knew something important had passed between them. She didn't know who he was or where he'd come from, but she didn't need to. He was here. He had chosen her. And in a world where even the smallest things could feel like a battle, that was enough to make her feel brave. The stillness shattered with a voice like cracked glass. "Erin McKay, what do you think you're doing?" Erin froze. Her fingers, still dusted with crumbs from the bread Rox had gently taken moments ago, clenched into fists. She turned slowly toward the sound, already knowing who it was. Mrs. Jensen, wrapped in a fleece robe with pink curlers bobbing in her hair like tiny grenades of judgment, Mrs. Jensen stood at the fence bordering her back garden, a chipped mug of coffee in one hand and a scowl sharp enough to slice bark off a tree. "I saw that," she said, pointing her mug like a weapon. "You're feeding that dog again." Erin opened her mouth but couldn't find words fast enough. Her heart pounded, not from guilt, because she wasn't sorry, but from fear that Rox might still be visible. She turned her head just enough to see the tail end of him disappear behind the broken pallets, his form melting once again into the comfort of shadows. Safe, for now. "He's not dangerous," Erin said softly. Mrs. Jensen snorted. "Not dangerous. That thing's the size of a small horse. God knows where it came from. Could have rabies. Could snap without warning. You're lucky he hasn't bitten your arm off." "He's not like that," Erin whispered, her voice trembling but resolute. "Oh, honey, don't be naive. Strays are unpredictable. They're wild. They don't belong in neighborhoods with children and old ladies." Erin stood her ground, but her hand trembled slightly on the crutch. "He never hurts anyone. He doesn't even bark. He just listens." Mrs. Jensen shook her head, sighing like she'd seen this before. The kind of sigh that adults use when they think they know better. "Well, someone needs to tell your grandmother." The words struck harder than Erin expected. "No, please." She took a step forward, panic rising. "She doesn't know. I mean, she wouldn't understand." But it was too late. Mrs. Jensen raised her voice just enough to pierce the morning quiet. "Miriam, Miriam, are you home?" The back door creaked open. Her grandmother. Gray sweater draped loosely over her thin frame, her hair still tied in a sleeping scarf. She blinked at the light, confused. "Marla? What on earth?" Mrs. Jensen didn't wait. "Your granddaughter has been sneaking out to feed that stray behind your shed. Big, ugly thing. Could be dangerous." Erin saw her grandmother's eyes shift, from Mrs. Jensen to the crutch under Erin's arm to the alley beyond, then back to Erin. Her face changed, not into anger, not yet, but into something heavier, something that felt like disappointment. "Aaron," she said, her voice barely a breath. "Is that true?" Aaron couldn't lie. She nodded slowly, her throat tightening. "I didn't think it was bad," she said. "He's not like the others. He's not mean. He just sits and listens and—" "That's enough." Her grandmother's voice wasn't sharp, but firm, final. "But he needs me," Aaron tried. Her voice cracked. "He waits for me. Every morning." Miriam McKay walked forward slowly, her slippers brushing the stone path. She reached out and gently rested a hand on Aaron's shoulder. "And I need you," she said. "Safe. Not risking yourself with wild animals. I know your heart is kind, Aaron. But kindness needs boundaries." "But he's not wild," Aaron said, more fiercely now. "He's lonely." Her grandmother's face softened for just a moment. A flicker, maybe recognition, maybe regret, moved across her eyes. But then it was gone. "No more," she said gently. "Do you understand?" Aaron didn't reply. Her silence said enough. That night, the locks came. The front door, the back, the windows in her room, the latch on the basement crawl space. One by one, each barrier fell into place with the soft, chilling click of disapproval. Her grandmother didn't yell, she didn't scold, but every lock felt louder than a scream. Aaron sat on the edge of her bed, arms wrapped around her knees. The slice of bread she had hidden in her drawer remained untouched. And Rox, she didn't know if he would come tonight. She didn't even know if he would understand why she wasn't there. Her room felt smaller than usual, the air heavier, like the walls were closing in with each tick of the old wall clock. She crawled to the window and tried the latch again, still locked. Her fingers curled into the sill, knuckles white. The porch light flickered once in the distance, casting long shadows into the alley. She stared until her eyes stung. "I'm sorry," she whispered. And she meant it. Not because she had done something wrong, but because someone else thought she had. That night, sleep didn't come easily. Dreams dissolved into static, and every creak of the floorboard sounded like a footstep that wasn't hers. But when dawn finally cracked the sky open with its first pale blue light, Aaron did what she had always done. She waited. She waited for the sound of silence. She waited for the world to forget she existed, just long enough to be brave again. Because deep down she knew no locked window, no disapproving glance, no frightened neighbor with a coffee cup and a loud mouth would stop her from being the only person who had ever seen that dog. And she would not let the world teach her that kindness was a mistake. The alley was quieter than usual that morning. The sun had only begun to smear pale gold across the tops of rooftops, but Aaron was already there, sitting on the overturned crate with her legs tucked under her sweater, her fingers curled tightly around the napkin she had folded and refolded too many times. The bread inside was cold now, but she didn't move to unwrap it. Rock sat a few feet away, like he always did, regal in his silence, still as stone. Only his ears twitched when a bird chirped from a nearby tree, but his gaze never left her. For once, Aaron didn't speak right away. There was something different about the silence this time. Not empty, but waiting. She had always brought her voice to fill it, to tell him he was safe. But today, she needed it to fill her. A wind passed through the alley, tugging strands of hair across her cheek. Finally she spoke. "Do you ever feel like you were built wrong?" Rox didn't react. Not in the way most dogs would. No tilted head, no whimper. But Aaron swore the air around them changed, like he was listening. She exhaled slowly. "Like, people look at you and only see the part that's broken." Her fingers brushed the crutch resting beside her. The cold metal made her wince. "At school, they think I'm weak. They don't say it to my face, not always, but I can hear it in the way they laugh behind my back. How they stare when I walk. Like it's painful to watch me move." She glanced at Rox. "I heard one boy say I looked like a bird with a broken wing. Funny, right?" She tried to laugh, but it came out too thin. Except it wasn't. The dog shifted slightly, not closer, not away, just enough to let her know he was still there. Aaron looked down at her hands. Her nails were bitten short, and the skin near her knuckles was cracked from cold. "They don't let me play in gym. I sit on the bench and pretend not to care. But I do. I really do." She swallowed hard. "Yesterday I asked if I could help with the art supplies during free time." Mrs. Larkin smiled that smile, the one teachers use when they're trying to be nice but really just want to say, "You'll slow everyone down." She told me to sit and draw instead. As if drawing doesn't make me feel slower, too. Her voice trembled, but she didn't stop. "I think I'm invisible to most of them. Or worse. They see me, but not really. Just the limp, the cane, the label." A small sound broke the silence. Rox let out a low, quiet breath. Not quite a sigh, not quite a growl. Just a presence. A murmur of acknowledgement. As if somewhere in the weight of those golden eyes, he understood every word. Aaron blinked fast and looked at him. "You get it, don't you?" she whispered. "They probably look at you the same way. Scary. Dirty. Not safe. But I see you." Rox's tail shifted once across the concrete, a single deliberate motion. "I see how careful you are," she continued, her voice softening. "You never growl at me, never beg. You just sit here, like you're waiting for someone who doesn't exist anymore." Her throat tightened at her own words. "I know what that feels like." She reached into her lap, unwrapped the bread, and placed it gently on the ground between them. Rox didn't move, not yet. "I don't have a lot of friends," she admitted, staring at her hands again. "Actually, I don't think I have any. Not real ones." There was no bitterness in her voice, just fact, like saying the sky was gray. "I used to think maybe I was too quiet, or too slow. That if I could just walk normally or talk louder, maybe someone would sit with me at lunch without being told to." Rox took a careful step forward. Aaron didn't flinch. She just watched as he approached. Not for the bread, not entirely, but for her. Something about the moment felt different than all the ones before. He reached her side and sat, not facing her, not needing to, just next to her, like the world didn't need permission to feel right. She let the silence rest between them again, then said, almost to herself, "You're the only one who listens?" The words hung there, simple and aching. Then Rox did something he hadn't done before. He leaned his head gently, so gently, against her knee. Aaron's breath caught. She stared down at him, eyes wide, unable to move. Her fingers hovered in the air for a moment before they found courage, and then slowly she let her hand rest on the top of his head. His fur was rough, matted, warm beneath her skin. She didn't say, "Thank you." She didn't need to. In the quiet alleyway, beneath the shifting light of a sky slowly waking, a little girl and a forgotten dog sat side by side, two souls that didn't fit the world they'd been given, but somehow fit each other. And in that quiet, the ache in her chest didn't disappear, but it softened. Because for the first time in a long time, Erin didn't feel alone. The wind moved gently through the alleyway, brushing loose strands of Erin's hair across her face. She didn't bother pushing them away. Her hand was still resting on Rox's head, and she was afraid to move, afraid that whatever moment had just bloomed between them might vanish if she shifted too quickly. But Rox didn't pull away. If anything, he leaned into her touch. It was a small gesture, simple, but to Erin it felt like the world had tipped slightly on its axis, like something inside her had been seen and just for a second understood. She let out a slow, shaky breath. "You don't talk," she murmured, "but you listen better than anyone I've ever met." Rox didn't look at her. His gaze remained fixed on the alley's entrance, alert but calm, the way someone might look at a world they'd learned not to trust. Yet his body was at ease beside her. His tail, thick and unkempt, gave a small, deliberate wag. Erin's heart skipped, just once. She blinked, unsure she'd imagined it. But no, there it was again. A flick, quiet and controlled, like a message carved in silence. "I heard you." Her throat tightened. Not from sadness, not exactly. It was something softer, a kind of ache that came when a wound was finally acknowledged. "You're not like the other dogs," she whispered. "You're not loud. You don't chase cars or bark at kids. You don't flinch when someone drops something loud." She paused. "You just sit and watch, like you've seen things you don't want to remember." Rox shifted his head slightly. Not a full turn, but just enough for his golden eyes to glance up toward hers. The morning light caught the edge of his iris, turning it almost amber. He didn't blink. He just looked. And Erin felt it again, that strange, breathless moment where a stare wasn't just a stare, but a kind of answer. "I think," she said softly, "we're both a little invisible." She didn't expect him to understand the words, but something in her chest dared to believe he might understand the feeling of being looked at, but not seen, of being treated like a burden, a problem to manage, an inconvenience to avoid. Rox's ears flicked back. Not in fear, in attention. Erin felt her breath catch as he tilted his head just slightly, the way he did when a noise far away caught his ear. But there was no sound this time, only her voice. "You really do listen, don't you?" Rox didn't move, but the silence between them changed again. It wasn't just the absence of noise, it was presence. Like the air had leaned in to hear her too. Erin looked down at her hands. She picked at the edge of the napkin on her lap, fingers twitching. "I used to think I was the only one who felt like this. Like something important got lost inside me after the accident. Like maybe the doctors fixed my leg, but forgot to fix the part that makes me feel whole." She laughed. It was dry, quiet, a little bitter. "But you're here. And somehow, I don't feel as broken." Rox's body shifted subtly. He stood, slow, calm, and walked the short space to sit even closer. His flank brushed lightly against her shin as he lowered himself back down beside her crate. She felt the warmth of him through her jeans, solid and grounding. Then he sighed, a deep, heavy breath that rumbled low in his chest and slipped out into the cold morning air. And it wasn't just a sigh. It was a reply. Her fingers curled slowly into his fur, and he didn't pull away. Erin closed her eyes. For the first time in what felt like years, she felt steady. Not strong, not brave, just steady enough to breathe without holding it all in. There were no grand gestures, no barking, no tricks, no tail-chasing joy. Just a dog and a girl, side by side on a forgotten street corner where no one came looking, where no one interrupted, and where neither had to explain the things they carried. She stayed like that for a long time. Eventually, Rox rested his head on his paws, his body curling slightly around her like a silent guard. Erin looked up at the sky. The blue was blooming now, shy and slow, between layers of gray clouds. Birds chirped softly in the distance. Somewhere far away, a car started, a door slammed, a baby cried. The world was waking up. But in the alley, it was still quiet, still sacred. And in that stillness, Erin smiled. Not because the world had changed, but because something in her had. She didn't feel invisible anymore. The lock clicked. It was a small sound, barely louder than the creak of an old floorboard or the sigh of a closing door, but to Erin it was deafening. Her grandmother didn't yell, didn't scold. She didn't even look angry. That somehow made it worse. After dinner, when Erin had started to rise from the table with her usual excuse, "Just getting some fresh air, Grandma," she was met not with permission, but with pause. A long, heavy pause. Then her grandmother stood, walked across the room, and one by one, without a word, turned the lock on the front door, the back door, and finally, Erin's window. The sound of metal sliding into place felt like a verdict. "Why are you doing this?" Erin's voice was barely a whisper. Grandma turned, her weathered hands now resting on her hips, her shoulders trembling slightly. "Because I'm afraid," she said simply. "Afraid of him?" Erin asked, stunned. "He's never—" "No," her grandmother's voice cracked. "Afraid of losing you." Erin stood frozen in the hallway, the air suddenly too tight in her lungs. "You don't understand. He's not dangerous. He waits for me. Every single morning, he's there." "That's what I'm afraid of," Grandma murmured almost to herself. "A stray dog shouldn't be that predictable. That's not natural." Erin took a step forward, anger flaring in her chest. "It's not about nature. It's about loyalty." Her grandmother's expression faltered. For a moment, she looked like she wanted to say something more. But she didn't. She turned off the kitchen light instead. The house dimmed, and the locks stayed. That night, Erin didn't sleep. She lay curled beneath her blanket, arms wrapped around her crutch like a lifeline. Every minute stretched like string being pulled too tight, vibrating with everything she couldn't say out loud. She watched the shadows on her ceiling shift with the headlights of passing cars, waiting for dawn to come like a rescue boat that might never arrive. At some point, she got up, tiptoed barefoot to the window. Her fingers touched the latch, knowing exactly where it was, expecting it to turn with that familiar faint click of freedom. But it didn't move. The cold metal held firm in her hand, unmoved by pleading or hope. Her breath caught. "Please," she whispered into the glass. "Just this once. Please." The window didn't answer, and that's when it happened. The tears didn't come all at once. They started as heat behind her eyes, a sting she tried to blink away. But then the ache in her chest grew too loud, too deep, and before she could stop herself, she sank to the floor, burying her face in her hands. It wasn't just about the locked window. It was about being told that something good in her life wasn't safe, that something that made her feel seen was a mistake. She felt like the world was trying to take Rox away without even bothering to learn his name, and no one understood how much that hurt. She cried until her ribs hurt, until her throat was raw from holding back the sobs she didn't want her grandmother to hear. And still, the window stayed locked. When the first light of morning crept into her room, soft and tentative, Erin rose from the floor. Her eyes were swollen. Her hair clung to her cheek, but she moved on instinct, pulling herself up with the crutch and stepping toward the window, because some part of her heart still believed he'd be there. She wiped the glass with her sleeve. The backyard was wrapped in mist. The alley behind the house sat in its usual hush, the concrete still dark with dew. At first she didn't see anything. Then her breath caught. Just beneath her window, nestled against the edge of the flower bed, was a slice of bread, carefully placed, not torn or dropped, not pecked at by birds, just there, like a gift laid gently by hands that didn't have fingers. And a few feet beyond it, almost invisible in the haze, sat Rox, still, watchful, waiting. His golden eyes met hers through the glass, calm and unwavering. He didn't bark, he didn't pace, he didn't turn away. He just sat there, like he'd known she couldn't come, like he had come instead, like he forgave her without needing an apology. Erin clamped a hand over her mouth as the tears welled again, but this time they were different. These were tears that came when you realized someone hadn't given up on you, that even locked windows couldn't keep love from finding a way in. She pressed her forehead to the glass. "I'm here," she whispered. And though he couldn't hear the words, Rox stayed exactly where he was, because he already knew. It was supposed to be just a short walk, nothing dangerous, just down the street, across the cracked sidewalk with weeds poking through, and into the park Erin had loved since she was little. The sun was soft that morning, filtered through the old oak trees that lined the path like tired guardians. Birds chirped without rhythm. A swing creaked in the breeze. She needed air. After days of being watched, of locked windows and whispered worries, she needed to be somewhere that didn't feel like it was closing in on her. The park had always been her quiet place. But quiet didn't last long when you moved slower than the world around you. She barely made it past the bench near the broken drinking fountain when she heard it first like wind, then clearer. Laughter. Not the good kind. The kind that stuck to your skin, that turned light into shadow. Erin stiffened, her fingers tightening around the rubber grip of her crutch. She didn't turn. Not yet. But she could feel them behind her. "Hey, Erin!" one of the boys called out. Cody. His voice oozed mockery the way some kids dripped meanness without even trying. "Where's your stick today?" "Oh, wait. There it is." She turned, slow and careful. There were 3 of them, all from school, not friends, not even classmates, just kids who noticed she limped, and in their world that was enough reason. "Going for a jog?" another one sneered, grinning. "Want us to time you?" Erin swallowed. "Just going home," she said softly, her eyes on the ground. Cody stepped forward. "Don't you get tired of wobbling everywhere like a baby deer?" She didn't answer. The silence made them bolder. In one sudden motion, he lunged forward, snatching her crutch from under her arm. "Hey!" she gasped, stumbling. The ground came fast. Pain bloomed through her hip as she landed hard, the breath knocked from her lungs. Her palms scraped against the gravel, skin peeling. The boys laughed again, louder this time. "Look at her! Down goes Tiny Tim!" someone cackled. Aaron's eyes burned. Not from the fall, not even from the sting of open skin, but from the humiliation, the helplessness, the knowing that they saw her not as a person, but as less. She tried to get up, her elbows trembling as she pushed against the earth, but her leg wouldn't cooperate. It dragged uselessly behind her, aching with the familiar, stubborn pain of something that never quite healed right. Cody tossed the crutch from hand to hand, grinning. "What's the magic word?" "Give it back," she cried. "Nah," he shrugged. "We're having fun." Another boy took out his phone. "Let's make a TikTok crutchless challenge or something." Aaron froze. That humiliation twisted into fear. This wasn't just teasing. This was turning her pain into performance. And then, the shift. It happened so fast, the air seemed to snap. A growl, low, steady, like thunder you could feel in your bones, rippled through the park. The laughter stopped. All three boys turned. From the far end of the walking path, emerging like a phantom from between the trees, came rocks. But this wasn't the rocks Aaron knew from her backyard. This was a protector, a force. His body was tense, muscles tight beneath his ragged fur. His ears were pinned back, and his teeth, usually hidden behind a gentle mouth, were bared in a silent warning. Cody took a step back. Is that a stray?" Rocks didn't bark. He didn't need to. He charged, not fast, not reckless, but deliberate, controlled. Every step was a promise. The boys dropped everything. The crutch hit the ground with a dull thud. They ran, tripping over their own feet, shouting, scattering like leaves in wind. Rocks stopped beside Aaron. His eyes flicked over her, reading the dirt on her face, the tears in her eyes, the raw red of her palms. He didn't lick her, didn't nuzzle. He simply stood between her and the world, like a wall, like a vow. Aaron reached for the crutch with shaking fingers and pulled herself into a sitting position. Rocks watched, unmoving. When she was upright again, barely, painfully, she rested her forehead against his side. "I knew you'd come," she whispered, tears falling freely now. "I knew." And for a brief second, his head dipped. Not much. Just enough for his muzzle to rest softly against her shoulder. The warmth of it undid something inside her, because in that moment she wasn't just the girl with the limp. She wasn't broken or slow or invisible. She was seen, protected, chosen. And in the presence of that silent guardian, everything cruel in the world seemed to pause, just long enough for a wounded girl to breathe again. The fall didn't feel real until she tasted dirt. One moment Aaron was upright, tense, but standing, her knuckles white on the grip of her crutch as the boys circled like vultures. The next, the world tilted, the gravel rushed up, and the wind was punched out of her like a secret she didn't want to tell. Her knee hit first, then her hip, then her elbow, a cruel chain reaction of bone meeting earth. The silence afterward was the worst. It was only seconds, but it stretched long like time paused to watch her fall apart. Then came the laughter, It sliced through her like cold water. "Did you see that? She just dropped like a sack." Cody's voice, familiar, cutting. Another boy clapped. 10 out of 10, Aaron. Really nailed that landing." Her palms burned. Blood trickled in tiny, angry threads, mixing with dirt. But it wasn't the pain that made her body shake, it was the shame. It curled in her gut, sour and heavy. She blinked, and the world around her blurred. The sun was too bright, the sky too blue. Everything felt wrong. Above her their shoes circled like sharks. One of them picked up her crutch again, spinning it like a baton. "How do you even use this thing? Like this?" He pretended to limp in exaggerated fashion, dragging one leg. The others roared with laughter. Erin pressed her forehead to the ground. Not because she wanted to, because she couldn't lift it. Because maybe if she stayed still long enough, they'd forget she existed. Her chest heaved, breath catching. She wanted to scream, to vanish, to rewind everything, but the world didn't care. The gravel bit into her skin, unforgiving. And then it happened. A sound, low and primal, rolled across the park. It wasn't loud. It didn't need to be. It stopped the laughter mid-breath. A growl, not wild, not chaotic, but precise. Controlled. A threat wrapped in silence. Heads turned. Cody dropped the crutch. From the edge of the park, where tree shadows met pavement, a figure stepped forward. Rocks. He didn't bark. He didn't charge. He simply appeared as if the earth had summoned him. The sun caught on the silver in his fur, ragged but regal. His ears stood tall, his posture taut, every muscle coiled like it remembered war. But it was his eyes that made everything stop. Not red, not savage, just sharp, watchful, unforgiving. "Whoa, what is that?" one of the boys stammered. Cody took a step back. "It's that stray again, the one she feeds." Rocks moved forward, slow, measured, like a question with only one right answer. The boys didn't wait to find out what would happen next. They ran, fast, tripping over their own bravado, scattering toward the street, not daring to look back. And just like that, the park was quiet again, all except Erin's ragged breathing. She hadn't moved. Her shoulders trembled, her fists clenched, her body didn't trust the silence yet. Then she felt it, not a touch, not exactly, but presence, warmth. A shadow fell across her fingers, and when she lifted her head, she saw him. Rox was standing inches away, close, but not too close, watchful, waiting. His tail didn't wag, his ears didn't lower, but his eyes, they held her, as if to say, "I saw everything, and I stayed." She looked up at him, her face streaked with dust and salt water, her lips parted but no sound came. How do you thank something that doesn't speak your language? Instead, she moved, slowly, carefully. With trembling fingers, she reached out toward the fur on his leg. He didn't flinch, didn't pull away. Her hand landed lightly against him, and for a moment her body stopped shaking. The pain was still there. The scrapes, the bruise blooming on her hip, the sting in her pride. But something deeper, something quieter, had begun to shift. Because someone had seen her fall and stayed. Because something had growled for her. And in a world where kids laughed and adults warned, there was now this. A shadow that stepped between her and cruelty. A dog with no collar, no owner, and no obligation, who chose her anyway. The moment the last of the boys vanished down the sidewalk, silence fell like a curtain over the park. a silence not empty, but charged full of something ancient and unmoving. Erin was still on the ground, dust clinging to her scraped palms, pain throbbing in her hip and knee, her breath short and clipped. She blinked against the brightness of the sky, half certain that she'd imagined him. But then she looked up, and he was there. Rocks. Standing like a sentinel, his silhouette outlined by the afternoon light filtering through the trees. His chest rose and fell slowly, controlled. Legs planted wide, tail still and low, not tucked in fear, not lashing in aggression, but ready. He didn't snarl, didn't chase, didn't need to. It was the way he stood, as if some invisible line had been drawn in the grass and he was daring anyone to cross it. The boys, Cody and the others, they hadn't just run from a dog. They had fled from something they didn't understand, something too calm, too sure of itself, something that felt like command. He was thin, that much was still true. His ribs etched faint shadows beneath his matted coat. But nothing about Rock seemed weak now, not when he stood like that, not when his head lifted with the weight of memory, of discipline, of training. In that moment, Erin saw it fully. He moved like a soldier, not just a stray, not just a protector, a being who had once been led and had once led. Something in her heart clenched so tight she thought it might break. She reached for her crutch, but it was still out of reach, lying where Cody had flung it. Her arms gave a shaky attempt at pushing herself up, but her legs wouldn't obey. And then Rocks moved. Not in a rush, no panic, just 2 deliberate steps forward. She froze, afraid to scare him off, but he didn't retreat. Instead, he closed the distance between them until his nose was level with hers, and she could see the details of his face scars, old and fading, eyes the color of storm-washed earth, and ears pricked like they'd never forgotten how to listen. They stared at each other, 2 survivors, both scraped and bruised, both tired of flinching. Then something inside her cracked. Not a bone, not a muscle, something deeper. And Erin did something she hadn't done in over a year. She let herself collapse into someone else's presence. She leaned forward, not all the way, but enough that her forehead came to rest softly against the fur of his shoulder. And Rocks didn't move, didn't tense, didn't flinch. His warmth was steady, his breath slow and even, grounding her. The sobs came quickly, ugly, hiccuping ones she tried to hold back, but couldn't. All the things she'd kept bottled her limp. The laughter in the hallways, the bruises no one asked about, the loneliness nobody saw spilled out in the silence between them. Rocks didn't lick her face. He didn't nuzzle or whimper or wag his tail. He just stood there and didn't leave. And that was everything. It wasn't a dog comforting a child. It was a soldier standing guard over a fallen comrade. Minutes passed. Her fingers curled gently into the thick fur at his neck, and she felt something there beneath the grime and dust. A strip of worn leather, a collar. Not a new one, not something from a store. This one was old, scarred. The buckle was scratched, the metal tag long gone. But it was there, evidence that once, somewhere, someone had named him, had trusted him, had possibly even loved him. And that trust had been trained deep, so deep that even now, forgotten and lean, he still protected. Her voice, when it came, was hoarse, fragile. "Where did you come from?" she whispered, more to the wind than to him. Rocks didn't answer, but his eyes met hers, calm and alert, as if to say, "Does it matter?" "I'm here now." Her tears slowed. She wiped her face with the sleeve of her shirt, smearing dirt and salt together, and managed a breath that didn't shake so hard. "I'm sorry they were mean," she said softly. "They don't understand." Another beat of silence. Then slowly, so slowly she barely noticed, Rock sat down beside her, not pressing in, not hovering, just there, like he was staying. And for Aaron, for the first time in what felt like a lifetime, that was enough. The sun dipped lower behind the trees, casting long shadows across the grass. And at the center of it all, a girl with scraped hands and a broken limp, and a dog who once belonged to somewhere he no longer remembered, both piecing themselves back together, quietly together. The sky was a dusky wash of gray and lavender, the kind of quiet twilight that made street lamps flicker on early and windows glow like tiny hearths. Aaron walked with a slow, cautious rhythm, one foot steady, the other dragging just slightly, her crutch clicking softly against the uneven sidewalk. Her backpack, weighed down with unfinished homework and library books, bumped lightly against her spine. Beside her, rocks padded silently, every muscle fluid, every step light as breath. He never pulled, never wandered. He simply walked with her, as though he had always known how to match her pace, her rhythm, without being taught. She liked to pretend they were invisible like this, just two shadows moving through the hush of evening. But today, something felt wrong. It began as a prickling, a sensation in the back of her neck, like air moving wrong against her skin. She glanced sideways. Nothing. She kept walking. But then Rox slowed. He didn't growl, didn't bark. His ears flicked forward and his head turned slightly, not sharp, not sudden, but controlled, deliberate, the kind of movement that said, "I see something." Aaron followed his gaze. Across the street, behind the cracked glass of an old laundromat window, stood a man. Tall, still, wearing a long dark coat and a black beanie pulled low over his forehead. At first, Aaron thought he might be a reflection, but then he moved, just a tilt of the head, just enough to show he was looking, not at her, at Rox. There was something in the man's posture, something frozen and taut. His eyes, barely visible from where Aaron stood, were wide, narrowed, then wide again, like he was seeing a ghost. His hand twitched at his side, fingers curling slowly into a fist. It wasn't just surprise. It was recognition. A cold knot formed in Aaron's stomach. She took a half step back, her crutch tapping a little louder than usual. Rox hadn't moved. He was staring straight back, tail low, but still, body braced, not aggressive, but aware. She turned to him, whispered low, "Do you know him?" Rox didn't react, but his gaze never wavered. When she turned back to the man, he was gone. The glass reflected only the amber blur of streetlight and the faint outline of Aaron's own nervous face. But she had seen him. He wasn't just someone. He had looked at Rox the way someone might look at a photograph of a loved one long believed dead. Or worse, a weapon that had vanished. Aaron swallowed hard. She didn't tell Rox to move. She didn't need to. He shifted slightly, eyes still on the empty laundromat window, before nudging closer to her side. His presence wasn't warm, not exactly, but solid, grounded, like a wall of fur and instinct that no one could move without permission. The knot in her stomach refused to go away. They walked the rest of the way home faster than usual, and every time Erin looked over her shoulder, the shadows behind them stayed still. But she couldn't shake the feeling that someone was still watching. From a distance. From the past. It happened 2 days later. The sky was overcast, a dull quilt of clouds pressing low over the town. The air smelled faintly of copper, and asphalt rain had fallen, but only enough to smear the dust. Erin was outside the bakery near Main and Lark, waiting while her grandmother picked up a loaf of rye. Rock sat beside her, close enough that their shoulders nearly touched. He'd grown used to her silences. She'd grown used to his quiet protection. They didn't talk, not in words, but the stillness between them always felt spoken. Then a shadow fell over the sidewalk, long, hesitant. She looked up. It was the man from the laundromat. Closer now. He stood just beyond the edge of the awning, half lit by the bakery's soft orange glow. His coat was worn, collar turned up against the wind. The beanie was gone, replaced by damp curls clinging to his forehead. His face was lined, older than she'd thought, but it was the eyes that stopped her. Wounded, searching. He didn't look at her. He looked at rocks, like nothing else in the world existed. And then, voice barely above a breath ruff, like it hadn't been used in years, he spoke. Echo? The syllable hung in the air like a spark before a fire. Rox froze. Not a twitch, not a blink. His breath caught in his chest. Erin felt it. His entire body had gone taut, like wire pulled tight across a fault line. The man took a small step forward, hands out, palms open, trembling. It's you, isn't it? Echo boy. I thought you were. He didn't finish. Rox's ears flattened, not in fear, not quite in anger. Something more complicated. His head tilted slightly, jaw firm, body unmoving, but the fur along his shoulders began to rise. A low sound rumbled from deep within him. Not a growl. Not yet. But a warning. Erin stepped between them instinctively. His name is Rox, she said, her voice firmer than she expected. The man blinked. That's not his real name. It is to me. She could feel Rox behind her, like a coiled spring, every part of him alive and aware. But he didn't move. His eyes never left the man. The stranger's face crumpled slightly, like something inside him had given out. He looked down, then away, wiping a sleeve across his cheek with more force than necessary. I didn't mean to frighten you, he said softly. I trained him. Years ago. Before everything. He looked at her now. Truly looked. He saved lives. Dozens. Maybe more. We called him Echo because he always came back, no matter how far we sent him. No matter what he saw. Erin didn't speak. Her throat had gone dry. The silence stretched. Rox let out a short exhale. Not quite a sigh, not quite forgiveness, but something less rigid. The man stepped back. If he's with you now, then maybe that's where he's meant to be. He turned slowly, as though leaving something behind took more effort than arriving. But just before he disappeared into the mist, he called back over his shoulder, "Take care of him. He's more than you know." Erin stood still long after the man had gone. She turned to Rox. He hadn't moved. His eyes met hers, uncertain, unreadable, and for the first time she saw something behind them that scared her more than any growl or bark ever could. History. He wasn't just a stray. He was someone else's soldier, and someone else still remembered. It was late afternoon when he came back. Erin had been walking home from school, alone as usual, her backpack dragging slightly on one shoulder, her limp more noticeable after a long day. The fall in the park still echoed in her bones. Rox wasn't with her this time. She didn't expect to see the man again. But there he was, Daniel leaning against a rusted light pole across from the cemetery wall, a manila envelope clutched tightly in one hand like it held something fragile. His face wasn't as rough as she remembered. Maybe it was the daylight. Or maybe it was the weight of something he was finally ready to release. He didn't call out. He waited until she noticed him. And when she stopped walking, he crossed the street slowly, cautiously, and offered her the envelope without a word. Erin didn't take it right away. "Is that supposed to be about Rox?" she asked, her tone guarded. Daniel gave a quiet nod. "It's about Echo, what he was, who he belonged to, and why I think he chose you." She took the envelope, opened it carefully, and then the world narrowed. It was a photograph, worn at the edges, color starting to fade. But the image was clear. A boy, maybe 10 or 11, sat in a wheelchair, his hands resting awkwardly in his lap. A crooked smile stretched across his face. His eyes were wide, full of something both bright and bruised. Beside him sat a German shepherd, not just any. Rox, or Echo. You couldn't mistake that face. The intelligent calm, the quiet intensity, the left ear slightly bent at the tip. Even in stillness, he looked like he was listening. Erin stared at the photo. She didn't breathe. "His name was Mateo," Daniel said softly, stepping beside her. "He had a neurodegenerative disorder. Born with it. Lost the ability to walk by age 7. His parents enrolled him in an experimental program therapy animals paired with military-trained dogs. Echo was supposed to be temporary. He wasn't." Erin didn't move. The photo felt heavy in her hands. "He used to say Echo wasn't just his dog," Daniel continued. "He was his legs, his courage, his only real friend." The wind picked up, rustling the envelope. Erin tightened her grip. "What happened to him?" she whispered. Daniel hesitated, then looked away. "There was a fire at the facility. They said it was an accident. Echo ran into the flames when Mateo was trapped on the second floor." A long pause. They found Mateo's chair near the door. Empty, and a trail of soot prints, dog prints, leading out. But Echo was never seen again. At least, not until now. Erin felt something twist in her chest. "So he saved him?" Daniel's voice broke slightly. "Yeah. But Mateo died from smoke inhalation a few days later. Echo just vanished." He looked at her now, not as a stranger, but like someone who understood what it meant to be tethered to something broken. "He doesn't let people near him. Hasn't for years, from what I've heard. Until you." The silence between them stretched. She glanced down again at the photo. The boy's smile was crooked. His hand rested gently on Echo's head. She touched the image with her fingertips. Something sharp and tender flickered in her throat. "He's not a stray," she murmured. "No," Daniel said. "He never was." Later that night, Erin sat in her room, knees pulled to her chest, the photo in her lap like a fragile memory someone had entrusted to her care. Rox lay curled at the foot of her bed, his eyes flicked up to hers, quiet, watchful. She held up the photograph. "Was this you?" she asked, her voice barely a breath. Rox didn't move, but something shifted behind his eyes, something deep and old and hard to name. He blinked once, slowly, then rested his head on his paws. Erin didn't need him to answer. She already knew. The diner was quiet. Outside, rain tapped steadily against the glass like a clock running out of patience. Inside, the clink of coffee cups and the low hum of an old radio filled the silence between them. Daniel stirred his mug, not drinking it, just watching the swirl. Across from him, Erin sat hunched, her damp jacket still clinging to her arms, Rox curled beneath the booth beside her legs like a silent shadow. His eyes were open, alert but calm, as if he too remembered this place, as if it once belonged to another life. Daniel reached into his coat pocket and pulled out a second photo. This one newer, laminated, protected. He placed it on the table between them. Erin leaned in. It was the same boy, a little older now, maybe 12, still in a wheelchair but stronger, his posture more upright. And the smile this time, God, it was real. Sunlight caught in the corner of his eyes. You could almost hear his laugh. Next to him, Echo Rox sat like a sentinel, proud, relaxed, wearing a vest with a patch stitched over the side. Leo's partner, Police Canine Therapy Unit. Her breath caught. His name was Leo, Daniel said softly. My son. Erin looked up, startled. Was? Daniel nodded once. A pause stretched between them like the pause before thunder. He was born with a spinal defect. Doctors gave him 3 years. He made it to almost 13. Daniel's voice was steady, but Erin noticed how his fingers trembled as he reached for the photo. He loved music, could name every constellation, but school, kids, the world was cruel to him. He glanced down at Echo. They gave us a choice. A pilot program pairing advanced canines with kids with severe disabilities. Therapy dogs trained with tactical obedience, part guardian, part lifeline. I said no at first, thought it was too risky. Leo insisted, said he didn't need protection. He needed someone who understood silence. His hand fell flat on the photo now. Echo wasn't just a dog. He was a soul tethered to Leo's in ways I still can't explain. Erin swallowed. I've never seen him bark, she whispered. Daniel gave a ghost of a smile. He doesn't. Not unless he has to. Leo used to say, Echo speaks in stillness. You just have to listen between the quiet. The memory wrapped around them like fog. Echo followed that boy everywhere, Daniel continued, to the hospital, to surgeries, even to school, until they made him stop going after a teacher complained, said it was unnerving how the dog could anticipate Leo's seizures before they showed on any monitor. He exhaled, bitter. Unnerving. That's what they called a miracle. Outside, the rain thickened. Inside, Erin's hands curled into the sleeves of her coat. She felt like a trespasser, like she'd stumbled into someone else's grief and didn't know how to walk back out. He disappeared after the fire, she murmured. Why didn't you look for him? Daniel's jaw tightened. His eyes burned, not with anger but guilt. I did. God, I did. I searched for months. Posters, vets, shelters. But Echo was trained for protection, survival. He knew how to vanish. Erin looked down at the German shepherd beneath her. He hadn't moved. but his ears were tilted, listening. "Maybe," she started, voice thin. "He didn't want to be found." Daniel nodded slowly. "Or maybe he was found. By someone who needed him next." Their eyes met. And in that quiet space between the old man's grief and the girl's longing, something unspoken passed, a shared understanding of loss, of second chances, of what it means to be chosen by something broken but still loyal. Daniel reached for his wallet and slid a small laminated card toward her. "This was Leo's emergency protocol," he said. "Echo responds to it. Might still, if he freezes or panics, show it to him. Say the phrase." Aaron took the card. It was simple. A photograph of Leo, and one line, "I'm safe. You're home." Her voice shook. "Did you ever tell him goodbye?" Daniel blinked hard. "No. I think he was always waiting to hear it." Aaron nodded slowly, then looked down again. Rock's Echo was already watching her. And for the first time, she didn't see a stray. She saw a soldier in mourning, a guardian waiting for a mission, a heart still tethered to a name no one had spoken in years. She reached beneath the table, resting her fingers gently on his fur. "You're not just mine," she whispered. "You were someone's miracle." And Rox closed his eyes, not in pain, but in peace. The bell above the diner door gave a half-hearted chime as Daniel stepped outside. Aaron stayed behind at the booth, card still clutched in her fingers. Outside, the rain had thinned to a mist. The world glazed in soft gray like a photo too painful to color in. Daniel stood under the awning, staring into nothing. His breath fogged the air like a secret still too warm to speak. After a moment, she followed. Rox came too silently, as always. They stood beside a newspaper vending box, now rusted shut, the headlines inside faded and unreadable. Daniel looked down the street as if trying to summon a memory, then finally said, "It wasn't supposed to be that day." Aaron looked up. "What wasn't?" Daniel kept his eyes on the road. "The field trip. It got moved last minute. I was on shift. Leo insisted he didn't need anyone to come with him. Said Echo was enough." His voice went thin. He was right. He cleared his throat, then began slowly, like each word cost something. They were headed to a museum. Freeway traffic was backed up. Some trucker lost control. He didn't finish. Didn't have to. The silence said everything. Aaron didn't speak. She just waited. Daniel continued, softer now. "The crash, it killed 3. Leo was one of them. Echo survived. Minor injuries. They say he refused to leave the scene, had to be sedated before paramedics could get near." A muscle worked in Daniel's jaw. "At the hospital, Echo just stopped." "Stopped?" "Stopped eating. Stopped responding. They said dogs grieve. I didn't know it could look like that." His eyes were far away now. "He lay beside Leo's wheelchair every night. Wouldn't move, wouldn't bark, wouldn't let anyone near the chair but me." Rox was still. His head low, ears half back, not in fear, but something close to reverence. "Then one morning," Daniel shook his head. "He was gone. No broken locks, no scratches on the door, just vanished. And the wheelchair." He trailed off. Aaron turned to him. "What about the chair?" "It was facing the window," Daniel said, barely above a whisper. Like someone had turned it to say goodbye. A breath caught in Erin's chest. She imagined it. A dark room, the weight of silence, the shape of a dog curled beside an empty seat. Then one last look toward the light. She swallowed. I kept thinking maybe he ran off because I couldn't fix it, Daniel said. Couldn't bring Leo back. Couldn't say the right things. You did your best, Erin said softly. But Daniel only shook his head. Echo didn't need me. He needed Leo. They were... He stopped. A tremor passed through him. There's no word for when a dog loses their child, he said. But I saw it. I saw what it did to him. They stood there, surrounded by mist and the hum of wet tires rolling through puddles. Some people say animals move on, he added, but I don't think Echo ever did. Erin looked down at the shepherd beside her. Rocks, no. Echo lifted his head. His eyes found Daniel's, not with recognition, but something heavier, as if searching for permission to remember. Is that why he came to me? Erin asked. Because I reminded him of... No, Daniel interrupted gently. I think he came to you because he chose you. Erin blinked. But I'm not. You don't have to be Leo, Daniel said. You just have to be someone worth staying for. She looked away, throat tight. A gust of wind brushed past, lifting strands of her hair, rustling the trees. In the hush that followed, Erin imagined the crash, the metallic scream, the shatter of glass, the smoke, the silence after. She imagined a boy's body stilled, and a dog refusing to move. Her voice barely broke through. How do you survive something like that? Daniel didn't answer. Instead, he reached into his pocket and pulled out a small tag-worn, edges faded, the kind they clip onto service dog harnesses. It read, Leo's Guardian, do not separate. He placed it in her hand. I never got to give him a new one, he said. But maybe you can. She closed her fingers around it, not because she understood yet, but because something told her she'd never forget again. Echo nuzzled her hand gently, then sat back on his haunches tall, composed, still as a soldier awaiting his next command. And for the first time since they met, Erin realized. He hadn't just wandered into her life by accident. He had walked out of a fire, crossed miles of grief, and chosen to start again. With her. Daniel sat alone on the park bench as twilight folded itself across the town like an old, familiar quilt. The grass, still damp from rain, shimmered under the dying sun. In the distance, Erin walked with rocks along the path's curve, her gait uneven, her crutch tapping like a metronome out of time. But she was laughing. Not the kind of laugh that sought to convince the world she was okay. This one was soft, unguarded, real. Rocks, no. Echo kept pace beside her. Alert, relaxed, as if this path had always belonged to them. Daniel had spent 4 years looking for that dog. Flyers, vet calls, shelter lists. He even paid a psychic once, half in disbelief, half in desperation. Nothing. And now, here Echo was, whole, breathing, changed. The guilt twisted in his chest like a knife. You were Leo's. That truth hung heavy, undeniable, the last thread tying him to a boy whose absence was a wound that never closed. Daniel lowered his head into his hands. He had imagined this moment differently. Finding Echo, kneeling down, calling his name, watching the shepherd sprint toward him like time hadn't passed. But Echo hadn't sprinted. He'd hesitated. Even now, as Aaron paused to throw a small stick and Echo darted forward to retrieve it, not out of duty, but delight, Daniel saw it. Echo had chosen again. He remembered what Aaron said earlier. He came to me when no one else did. And he believed her. Not because she needed it to be true, but because Echo's eyes said it was. The bench creaked as he stood. Echo returned with the stick, dropped it at Aaron's feet, and without turning, his ears twitched, registering Daniel's approach. A quiet hum passed between them. Daniel stopped a few feet away. "Does he sleep by your bed?" Daniel asked. Aaron nodded. "Flinches at loud noises?" She nodded again. "Still hates umbrellas?" That made her blink. "How'd you know?" Daniel smiled faintly. "Leo used to call them sky spiders." Aaron laughed a little too quickly, but her grip on the crutch tightened. "I don't want to take him from you," he said. She said nothing. I miss him. Not just the dog, the us, him and Leo. That was a pair." Aaron looked up. Her voice was barely audible. "Then why did you let him stay with me?" Daniel crouched to meet her eyes. "Because Echo didn't just survive Leo's death, he walked through it. And somehow, he walked toward you." He paused. "And when I saw you two together, I knew he wasn't lost anymore." A breeze moved between them. Light. Almost sacred. Aaron knelt beside Echo and ran her fingers through his fur. "Sometimes I think he sees something in me that I don't see yet." Daniel smiled. "Then maybe that's his purpose now." He stood, brushing dust from his knees. Echo walked to Daniel slowly, like a memory testing its place in the present. The man knelt, touched the dog's face gently, like the brush of an old photograph. "Hi, buddy." Echo leaned in, resting his head against Daniel's chest just once. Not in reunion, in release. Daniel whispered something Aaron couldn't hear, pressed his forehead to Echo's, then pulled away. As he walked back toward the street, he didn't look back. He didn't need to. Behind him, a girl with a crooked step and a dog once shattered by grief walked side by side into the soft blue of evening, and somewhere the echo of another boy's laughter carried on the wind. It began with a knock, not loud, not urgent, just steady. Aaron was in the kitchen, spreading peanut butter on a slice of bread 2/2, one for her, one for Rox. The second knock came, then silence. Rox lifted his head from his spot beneath the table. No bark, just stillness. Aaron peeked through the thin curtain. Daniel. Her breath hitched. She opened the door with trembling fingers. He stood there with his hands in his jacket pockets, face unreadable. "Hi, Aaron." She nodded, the peanut butter knife still in her hand. "I didn't know you were coming. I wasn't planning to. I was just thinking about what you said." "About Echo." Aaron's grip tightened on the doorframe. Rox stepped beside her, his body brushing hers like a shield. Daniel exhaled, voice gentle. "I need to say this, and I need you to really hear me. Can I come in?" She hesitated, then pushed the door open a little wider. The living room felt smaller with Daniel inside, like his presence made the walls lean in. Rox stayed between them. Not aggressive, just alert, watching. "I've been going back and forth every night," Daniel began. "I see how much he means to you, I do." He glanced down at Rox. "But he was mine once. My son's. And I can't stop thinking, maybe it's time he came home. Silence. Erin's pulse thundered in her ears. "I know it's hard," Daniel continued, "but he's the last piece of Leo I have. And maybe that's selfish, but you can't take him." The words shot out before she could contain them. Daniel blinked. "Erin, he's not just a dog," she whispered. "He's the first one who stayed, who didn't flinch when he saw me limp, who didn't laugh when I stuttered, who sat outside my window every single morning, even after Grandma locked the door." Her voice cracked. "He chose me." Daniel took a step forward, instinctively too fast. And in that instant, rocks moved. Not a growl, not a bark, just a shift of weight, a stance. He placed himself fully between them, head low, eyes focused, tail still. It wasn't a threat. It was a statement. "She is mine now." Daniel froze, hands raised. "I'm not here to hurt you," he said, voice soft, "and I'm not trying to erase what he's become to you." Erin's eyes shimmered with unshed tears. "Then why come back?" Daniel looked down, ashamed. "Because part of me thought he was only surviving with you. But I was wrong." He looked at Roxette Echo, and for the first time, not as something lost, but something changed. Not a ghost of Leo's past, but a guardian of someone else's future. "I didn't come to take him," Daniel said quietly. "I came to ask." Erin knelt beside Rox, one hand resting gently on his chest. He didn't flinch, didn't move, just stayed with her. "I can't say goodbye again," she whispered. "I can't go back to being alone." Daniel looked away, toward the framed photo still hanging in his wallet, Leo in his chair, Echo by his side, frozen in time. Then he looked back at the living, breathing truth standing beside a girl with a crooked step and the fiercest heart he'd ever seen. "I won't ask again," Daniel said, voice breaking. "But I want you to know if there's ever a day when he wants to come see me." He paused. "I'll be waiting." Rox watched him go, tail still, breath steady. When the door shut, Erin didn't cry. She simply leaned into Rox's side, felt the warm thump of his heartbeat beneath her palm, and whispered, "You're already home." The sun was soft that morning, barely more than a hush behind the trees. Erin sat barefoot on the back step, her crutch leaning against the railing, a chipped ceramic bowl of cereal in her lap. The world smelled like damp grass and old leaves, and everything felt slower like. Life had pressed a finger to its lips and whispered, "Wait." She didn't have to look behind her to know Rox was there. His presence had become a quiet certainty, like the hush before a lullaby or the warmth of sunlight through curtains. She dipped her spoon, swirled the cereal around in lazy circles. "I think he means well," she murmured, more to herself than to Rox. "Daniel, he just doesn't know you now." There was a pause, then the soft clink of paws shifting forward on the old wood planks. Rox nosed her elbow, a smile tugged at her mouth. "You're not his Echo anymore, huh?" The back gate creaked. She didn't flinch. She didn't have to. Rox rose, but not with alarm, with awareness. He stood beside her, silent as always, watching as Daniel stepped into the yard with careful footsteps and a paper bag in hand. "I brought something," Daniel said. His voice was low, not wanting to disturb the stillness. He crouched a few feet away, opening the bag to reveal something simple, something familiar. An old, worn blue rubber ball. Its surface bore the marks of countless teeth. On one side, faint lettering, Echo, Unit 03. He didn't toss it. He just held it in his palm. Rox looked. That was all. He didn't approach, didn't move toward the memory. Instead, he slowly turned and sat beside Aaron, his shoulder pressed against her knee. Daniel let out a slow breath. That ball was his favorite, he said softly. Leo used to roll it down the hallway, and Echo would always bring it back, never once dropped it. Aaron placed her hand on Rox's head, fingers gently tracing the edge of his ear. He hasn't chased anything since I met him, she replied, her voice quiet. Only shadows. Only me. The two fell into a long, aching silence until Daniel stood up again, gently brushing grass off his jeans. He didn't try to coax, didn't plead. He simply knelt once more, laid the ball on the ground between them, and said, I think he made his choice. Rox's ears flicked, but he didn't move. Daniel took a step back. Another. Then paused. He was everything to Leo, but maybe now he's everything to you. A soft exhale left him. No bitterness, no anger, just loss, and a strange kind of peace. Aaron looked down at the dog beside her. His tail gave a slow, tentative wag. She whispered his name, not Echo, but the name she had given him. Rox. And in that moment, he turned to her, fully, willingly. One paw moved over the blue ball, just a touch. Then he nosed it gently toward her foot, not to play, but to say that life was before. This one is now. She picked up the ball, turning it over in her fingers. The letters had faded, but her voice hadn't. Want to stay? Rox leaned against her leg, eyes half closed in quiet contentment. Daniel watched, heart clenched and raw. He understood. Sometimes love isn't in reclaiming what was yours. It's in letting it become something new, somewhere else. Take care of him, he said. He's more fragile than he looks. Aaron didn't answer, but she didn't need to. Rox had already chosen, and that was louder than any promise she could speak. The sky had turned a pale shade of surrender blushing, with the kind of gold that only comes after you've cried everything out and there's nothing left to fight. Daniel stood in the backyard, hands trembling slightly at his sides. The ball lay untouched at his feet. Rox Echo was no longer looking at it. He was watching Aaron. She hadn't said a word in minutes. Didn't need to, because some truths don't arrive in thunder. They settle like dust, quiet, final, soft. Rox lay at her side now, head resting against her thigh. His eyes fluttered closed, not from sleep, but from trust. A deep, surrendered kind. The kind that says, this is where I land. Daniel stepped closer. The grass crunched beneath his boots, but the dog didn't stir. He knelt slowly, age and grief showing in the wince of his movement. His fingers curled over his knee. I looked for him, he began, voice brittle like dried leaves. Miles of forest, shelters, vet clinics. I filed reports no one read. I kept his leash beside Leo's bed for 2 years. I swore if I ever found him, I'd bring him home. His throat tightened. But I was wrong about where home is. He looked at Aaron then. Really looked. A girl with too many scars for her age, and yet something unbroken remained. Not untouched, but unextinguished. And beside her the dog that once wouldn't eat after Leo died, now blinked up at her with something akin to light. Rox licked her hand gently. Daniel's voice cracked. He's chosen. A beat. Then the words dropped, final, as a folded flag. He's home. Silence. Even the wind held its breath. Rox lifted his head slowly, not out of alarm but as if sensing the weight of Daniel's surrender. He looked at the man who had once raised him with firm hands and softer prayers. The man who had taught him how to serve, how to stay, how to survive. And then Rox did something quiet, something clear. He blinked once and lowered his head back onto Aaron's lap. Daniel's eyes welled. Tears, unsummoned but true, gathered and fell. He reached out a hand not to take, but to touch. Just a gentle brush of fur along the shoulder, like blessing something before you let it go. "You protected Leo when no one else could," he whispered. "And now you're doing it again." Aaron wiped her cheek. "I don't want to take him away from you." But Daniel shook his head, slow and firm. "You're not taking," he gave himself. He stood with effort, brushing off the ache in his joints and in his heart. Then, almost as an afterthought, he reached into his coat pocket and pulled out a worn leather Tagno chain, just the ID plate. It was battered, scratched, the name Echo barely visible under the dents. "I think this belongs with him," he said. "Not because he remembers, but because you should." He handed it to her, and as she held it, cold, small, heavy with history, Rox stirred, tail thumping once against the porch plank. Daniel smiled through the blur. Then he turned toward the gate. The last thing he said before it creaked shut behind him was barely more than a murmur. "Tell him thank you. From Leo." The morning light didn't just pour through the window, it tiptoed, like it was careful not to disturb what was fragile. Outside, the frost had begun to melt on the garden railing, dripping in rhythm with the old kitchen clock. The house, still half asleep, held its breath in that sacred pause before the day unfolds. Aaron sat at the table, half smiling at the sound of Rox snoring gently by the stove. One paw twitched, maybe dreaming of squirrels or the long park trail where they now went almost every day. Grandma placed 2 cups of tea down, 1 chamomile, 1 cocoa, and took the seat across from her. She didn't speak at first. She just watched. Watched the way Aaron's shoulders sat lower these days, like someone had taken the invisible weights off. Watched how her eyes lit up whenever Rox entered the room, as if life arrived with the sound of pause. Then her gaze dipped lower, to the crutch resting against the chair. Unused, not forgotten, but no longer gripped like a shield. And then softly the question came, "Do you want to try without it?" Aaron blinked, not because she didn't hear, but because it landed somewhere tender, someplace still learning how to believe in herself again. The question didn't come with pressure. It came like an invitation, one born not from doubt, but from quiet witnessing. Aaron looked down at her hands, small, pale, still marked with faded scabs from weeks ago. Then to her legs, one of them always slower, always stiffer. She remembered the sting of that fall in the park, the laughter, the dirt in her mouth. And then Rox, that growl, that warmth, that loyalty. He had stood when she couldn't, but maybe now she could try. Not because she had to, because she wasn't afraid anymore. Her voice faltered, cracked like a window easing open. "Maybe, just a little, with him there." Grandma nodded, a smile tugging gently at her lips. "No rush," she said, fingers wrapping around the warm tea. "Just thought you might want to know." I see it. The change. Aaron looked up, eyes glossy not from sadness, but something harder to name. Hope. Do you think I can? Grandma reached over, placed her hand over Aaron's. No, darling, I don't think. She squeezed gently. I know. Rox stirred at the word, ears twitching. And maybe, just maybe. He knew too. The living room carpet felt different beneath Aaron's bare toes, softer, warmer, almost like the floor itself was holding its breath for her. Sunlight spilled through the lace curtains in rectangular pools, dust motes drifting like tiny confetti in the hush of morning. Grandma stood near the piano, hands loosely clasped, pretending not to watch but unable to look away. The crutch lay against the wall, close enough to reach, far enough to challenge. Rocks padded in from the hallway, nails tapping softly on the hardwood. He paused beside Aaron, amber eyes lifting to meet hers as if to ask, "Ready?" Aaron exhaled. Her heart beat a little too fast, the sound of it filling her ears like distant drums. She let her fingertips brush the dog's shoulder-rough fur, solid muscle, an anchor disguised as a friend. "One step," she whispered, more a promise than a plan. Rox shifted fractionally closer, steadying his stance. Not pushing, not pulling, just there. A living railing. His tail wagged once. Slow, deliberate, an understated yes. Erin's right foot slid forward, heel searching for balance on the carpet pile. Her knee trembled. The old ache flickered up her thigh like static. Instinct screamed for the crutch, for certainty. She kept her gaze on Rox. "I'm okay," she told herself, and maybe him. Her weight transferred, shaky but real. For a heartbeat, she wobbled, shoulders tilting like a ship in new water. Rox leaned barely a shift of mass, just enough to nudge equilibrium back to center. Aaron planted the foot, solid, one step. A gasp escaped Grandma, a small swallowed sound. Aaron didn't dare look. The tears in that corner of the room might drown her courage. She fixed on the next patch of light in front of her. The second step came easier in thought than in body. Muscles long accustomed to fallback strategies argued in sharp whispers, but the memory of bullies and gravel and helplessness burned hotter than fear. She would not crawl through life when standing was an option. She lifted her left leg, the weaker one, felt the tug of scar tissue, the protest of uncertain tendons. Rox matched the motion with a barely audible breath, torso bracing like a fortress wall. The foot touched down. Ankles quivered but held. 2 steps. A laugh burst from Erin's throat, half sobbing, half singing. She clapped a hand over her mouth, shocked by her own voice. Rox's ears perked. His tail swept the air faster, a banner of shared victory. "Again," she said, breathless. They moved as a unit girl and guardian across the sunlit rectangles, each step marking a tiny astonishment. 4 steps. 6. The carpet ended. Hardwood began, cool and slick. Aaron hesitated. Rox glanced up, muscles coiled, awaiting her decision. The world seemed to tilt toward that single line where softness met wood grain. Aaron imagined the hallway beyond the photographs of her parents, the doorway to the future she hadn't dared to picture. She whispered the words Daniel had taught her. "I'm safe. You're home." Rox's head nudged her fingers, warm reassurance. She squared her shoulders, pressed her foot onto the hardwood. It didn't betray her. Another step, another. Behind them, Grandma's quiet sob finally escaped, tremulous and bright. Erin stopped, turning carefully inside Rox's protective arc. She saw the tears on Grandma's cheeks, saw the love and the years of worry dissolving in real time. "I'm walking," Erin said, voice quaking with disbelief. "Grandma, I'm walking." "And running soon," Grandma choked out, half laughter, half prayer. Rox barked once, soft and triumphant. The sound echoed off the walls like a starter pistol for the life ahead. Erin reached down, weaving her fingers through the coarse fur at his neck. "Couldn't have done it without you, soldier," he huffed, pressing his forehead gently into her hip as if to say, "You were the one who stood." Together they turned back toward the crutch, leaning lonely by the wall, the artifact of another era. Morning light had shifted across it, casting a sharp silhouette on the floorboards. Erin felt no anger toward the stick of metal and rubber, only gratitude for what it had carried her through, and quiet relief that it no longer defined her height. She looked at Rox. Ready to leave that behind? The shepherd's tail answered before his body could, a slow, confident sway. Erin stepped forward, leaving the crutch in shadow as she and Rox crossed the threshold into the hallway's bright promise. Each step a declaration, each tremor a testament, each shared breath a vow that neither would ever walk alone again. A single step became 5. 5 blossomed into 10, then suddenly numbers could no longer keep pace with wonder. Erin moved down the hallway as though an invisible current carried her forward, feet padding softly over polished wood. Each stride sent a thrill crackling through her limbs, an electric disbelief that her own body, once an anchor, had turned to wings. Somewhere behind, the crutch clattered as it slid from the wall to the floor, forgotten. Its metallic thud should have echoed loss, yet the sound felt like a door closing gently on yesterday. "Slow down, sweetheart," Grandma called, half laughing, half sobbing as she hurried after. Tears streaked her cheeks, catching the hall's golden light. She pressed trembling fingers to her mouth, afraid that if she spoke too loudly the miracle might vanish like breath on glass. Erin didn't slow. Not yet. She reached the threshold to the front porch, flung the screen door wide, and stepped into the crisp afternoon. The yard gleamed after that morning's frost grass, jeweled with dew, sky a daring blue that seemed to widen just for her. She stopped in the center of the lawn, chest heaving, heart thrumming so hard she felt it in her fingertips. For a beat she simply stood unsupported, unrestrained, letting the breeze crown her hair and the sunlight paint warmth across her face. Then the laughter came. It burst out in bright, unstoppable peals notes she hadn't sung since before the accident. It shook her shoulders, bent her double, rose again, ringing across the neighborhood like church bells announcing an unexpected holiday. Rox bounded from the doorway, paws digging into damp soil, circling once before trotting to her side. He didn't bark. He didn't need to. His tail whirred in delighted arcs, eyes shining with something deeper than approval, pride, ancient and fierce. Erin reached for him automatically, but stopped midway, realizing she no longer needed the contact for balance. Her hand hovered inches above his head, trembling with new awareness. Rox noticed. With regal patience he stepped closer, not to prop her up, but to nudge her knuckles with his nose, sealing the moment like a signature inked in warmth. His eyes, a molten amber, met hers, and seemed to say, "I knew you could." Grandma emerged onto the porch, one hand clutching the railing, the other pressed to her chest. Tears fell freely now, but her smile shone through them, a sunrise after a forever night. "Look at you," she whispered, voice fracturing on the words. "Just look at you." Erin turned, arms splaying as if to hug the whole world at once. "I'm doing it, Grandma. No crutch, just me." Grandma descended the steps slowly, shaky with emotion, and crossed the yard. When she reached Aaron, she didn't rush into an embrace. She paused, as one does before touching a stained glass window, awed by fragile beauty. "May I?" she asked. Aaron nodded, laughter still hiccuping in her throat. Grandma framed Aaron's face with both hands, eyes roaming as though memorizing every freckle anew. Then she pulled her granddaughter close. They clung together in the damp, sweet air, sobs and laughter mingling until they became indistinguishable. Rox sat beside them, head high, tail sweeping slow figure eights on the grass like an artist signing a masterpiece. When Aaron finally drew back, wiping tears with the heel of her hand, he rose to meet her gaze again. "Thank you," she breathed, sinking to her knees so they were eye to eye. She cupped his muzzle. "For never letting me quit." He leaned in, forehead to hers, a silent benediction. A sudden impulse sparked. Aaron pushed to her feet alone and took several deliberate strides backward. Her legs shook but held. She grinned. "Ready?" she said. Rox's ears flicked forward. She clapped once and turned. She ran, not fast, not graceful, but free heels kissing earth, arms pumping, hair streaming behind like a banner of defiance. Rox loped beside her, matching pace effortlessly, eyes darting to check her stride, every muscle singing the same song. "Yes, yes, yes." Grandma, hands over her mouth, spun in place to keep them in view, tears gleaming like sunlight on river water. They reached the far fence. Aaron skidded to a breathless halt, wobbling, then laughing harder whole-body laughter that sprawled across the yard and climbed the trees. Rox pranced in jubilant circles, brushing against her legs, anchoring her joy to the earth. When she turned back toward the house, Grandma was kneeling on the porch steps, overcome. Aaron jogged into her waiting arms. 3 hearts pressed together, one rhythm pulsing through them all. Love reclaimed, possibility reborn. In that embrace, Aaron felt it, an unseen chain snapping free, the last link between past limitation and future promise. She wasn't just walking unaided. She was stepping into a horizon uncharted, guided by the steadfast compass of a dog who had already led 2 souls out of darkness. As the sun drifted west, long shadows stretched across the yard, but none could reach the circle of light encasing them. And in that fading glow, Rox nudged Aaron's twitching fingers once more, tail thumping a quiet anthem of pride. The girl smiled down at her guardian. "We did it," she said, voice hushed with reverence. Rox's eyes gleamed, reflecting sky, earth, and a future he had chosen to guard. And for the first time, Aaron understood the full measure of what it meant to be chosen back. Morning breaks over Sycamore Street, casting soft gold on mailbox tops and drawing dew into tiny prisms. Aaron stands barefoot on the back lawn, her crutch forgotten inside. For 6 days her body has ached, not with pain but with promise. At the garden's edge, Rox waits tail swinging slow, eyes tracking her every move. He's not leashed, but tethered to her by trust. Grandma watches from the porch, coffee in hand, love stretching across the grass like a safety net. "Same route?" Aaron calls. Rox trots a loop around the painted fence post, the start of what Grandma calls the courage circuit. Aaron steps forward. Her left leg lags a half beat, but she's moving. Rox mirrors her perfectly, shoulder a breath away, steady as the sky. They pass the lilac bush. Her toe catches a root, panic flares, but rock shifts beneath her hand just in time. She steadies. A nod passes between them. Continue. Around the oak tree she circles 3 times. The third loop bites pain, fast and sharp. She doubles over, grabs Rox's fur. "Breathe!" Grandma calls. She does. The spasm fades. They move on. Near the heart-shaped garden stone, Aaron slips on damp turf pitches sideways. Rox is already there, shoulder bracing her upright like a living shield. They finish. She collapses into his fur, laughter stitched with exhaustion. Grandma cheers from the porch, voice cracking. 2 minutes faster. Tomorrow Zero stumbles, Aaron gasps. Rox gives a skeptical huff. Aaron scratches his ear. "Oh, ye of little faith." They complete 3 laps before hunger wins. Back inside, Grandma wraps her in a towel like a returning hero. Rox sprawls nearby, collar tags clinking. Echo. Rox. Guardian. Later at the park, Aaron walks with quiet strength. The old bullies see her, Cody, Jenna, Matt, but this time she doesn't flinch. She walks right to them. "Thought you couldn't move without training wheels," Cody says. "I don't need it anymore," she replies. "Turns out you learn fast when someone believes you can." Cody tries to laugh it off. Aaron takes 1 step closer. Rox steps with her. Calm, alert, resolute. His stare alone changes the air. "He's not a mutt," she says. "He's Rox, he's mine. And he chose me." Jenna mumbles they were just leaving, but Aaron stops them. "You hurt me," she says, "and you knew it." Cody frowns. "I'm not here to fight. I'm here to say I got back up. And he made sure I didn't stay down." Silence. Then, softly, "I forgive you." Cody doesn't know why it stings. He nods once, then walks away. Later, on a park bench, Aaron and Rox collapse into laughter. She strokes his cheek. "That was scarier than walking." He presses his head to hers. Agreement. Across the field, kids are watching. But for the first time, Aaron doesn't care. She belongs here. By midweek, Sycamore Street starts whispering. Mrs. Jensen drops her shears when she sees Aaron walking, no limp, no fear, and Rox pacing beside like a trained sentinel. "She walks like she owns the sidewalk," someone says. "That shepherd's got soldier's eyes," says another. Photos circulate. One shows Aaron mid-stride, hair flying, Rox beside her like a shadow stitched in light. The caption reads, "Miracles do morning laps." Mrs. Porter, once afraid of Rox, tells Grandma in the store, "He's not dangerous. He's remarkable." Grandma only smiles. Just love doing its work. Soon, a card appears in the mailbox. "You and your dog are my heroes. Ella, room 2B. At school, Aaron runs obstacle courses. Rox barks once at the finish line. Coach Alvarez laughs. "College scouts'll be after you." Even Cody keeps his distance until one day his basketball rolls to Aaron. She kicks it back, clean and easy. He nods. Respect. Maybe step 1. On Sunday, the pastor mentions her in his sermon. "Sometimes healing walks on 4 legs," he says. People weep. And every day, Aaron walks, sometimes jogs beside her guardian. His tags jingle softly, announcing Echo, Rox, Chosen, Home. On a hilltop overlooking town, Aaron spreads a blanket beneath a white oak. The evening is soft, lavender sky bruising gently into night. She turns a ribbon in her fingers, Leo's old tag. Echo. I promised Daniel I'd keep this, she whispers. Rox noses it once, then rests his head in her lap. Do you remember the alley? She asks. I was scared. So were you. But maybe darkness was just a doorway. His tail thumps once. Agreement. She leans down, forehead to his. Heroes find who they're meant to. And maybe we found each other. Church bells chime. Stars rise like shy prayers. Above them, constellations bloom, the shepherd among them. Below, sycamore hums with new faith. You weren't lost, she says. You were finding your way to me. And Rox, with eyes that reflect every miracle she's lived, breathes in deep and stills beside her. Tomorrow, they'll walk again. And the sidewalk will remember. By the time she stepped up to the lectern, the whole class had stopped breathing. It was presentation day. The prompt, something that changed me. And Aaron Winters had brought more than a slideshow, she brought Rox. He waited calmly at the door, a statue with ears. Once, he'd been called Shadow. Before that, Echo. But to Aaron, he was something deeper. Protector, friend, compass. Aaron set the first photo on the projector. A dirty, frightened dog in an alley. Gasps stirred. This was Shadow, she said, before I knew who he really was. Click. Next photo. Aaron in the park, her crutch cast aside, Rox standing guard. I used to be scared of everything, she admitted. Mostly falling, mostly being laughed at. Her eyes found the boy who once teased her. He lowered his head. Another photo. Aaron walking unassisted, Rox beside her, Grandma crying on the porch. The class whispered, "Wow," like it was sacred. Then she stepped from the lectern, walked to Rox, unclipped his leash. A ripple of awe. She knelt beside him. His real name is Echo. He saved a boy named Leo. And then, he saved me. Questions followed. Is he a service dog? Are you still afraid? Yes, Aaron replied. But courage isn't no fear. It's walking anyway, and knowing someone will catch you if you fall. She walked across the room unaided, returned, sat beside Rox, who curled beneath her desk like a vow. Her final line? Some things look broken, but maybe they're just waiting to be chosen. The class stood, applauded, not because they were told to, but because they felt it. Even Cody nodded. A quiet thread of forgiveness stretched across the room and held. Weeks later, on the porch of a house stitched back together by love, Rox barked softly and alert, not a warning. Daniel Hale stood at the gate, hat in hand. He hadn't visited since letting Echo go. But something in his eyes less burden. More peace said he'd made the journey he needed to. I've found something at the precinct, he said. Something that belongs with you. From a velvet pouch, he revealed a badge. Blue enamel, silver star. Canine Therapy Unit. Leo Hale. Partner. Echo. Aaron's breath hitched. I thought they'd retired it, Daniel murmured. Turns out it was waiting for someone to claim the story again. He offered it with both hands. Aaron took it gently, pressing the cool metal to her chest. Thank you, she whispered. Rox stepped forward, nuzzled Daniel's hand, a silent truce between past and present. He looks different, Daniel said. So do you. They spoke of Leo, of Echo, of new purpose, stitched from old pain. Daniel handed Aaron 2 miniature ribbons commendations Leo had earned with Echo years ago. "Stories need souvenirs," he said. Aaron clipped the badge to Rox's collar beside his twin tags. He stilled, as if sensing the added meaning. Before leaving, Daniel looked back. "You gave him a new mission, Aaron, and gave me peace." Aaron could only nod. Some thank yous stretched too wide for words. That evening, Grandma summoned them to her sewing room, a place humming with history and healing. "I have something to finish," she said. On her table lay a new leather tag and a brass plate. "Rox, guardian of Aaron." "He's carrying Leo's badge," Grandma said, threading her needle, "but he should carry something for today, too." Rox sat proudly as she sewed, perfectly still. Aaron watched each careful pull of waxed cord, each tap of the thimble knots stitched with love. "A collar tag isn't just ID," Grandma murmured. "It's a declaration of belonging." When she finished, the new collar gleamed with 3 tags. Echo, a name from war and survival. Leo's badge, a name that once led. Rox, guardian of Aaron, a name still writing its story. As Grandma buckled it around his neck, Rox looked up at Aaron. She whispered, "Always." Rox leaned into her embrace. A tail thumped 3 times, a promise etched into the floorboards. Grandma folded the old collar into a satin pouch. "Keep this, a reminder of how far you both traveled." Outside, evening wrapped the world in amber. Porch lamps flicked on, and under their glow, a girl and her dog stepped forward, one badge heavier, one fear lighter. Rox walked with quiet pride. His tag gleamed with every step. Not just a pet, not just a survivor, not just a relic of someone else's story, but something new, a guardian, of Aaron, of courage, of hope made real. And under the stars, neighbors didn't just see a dog. They saw a miracle still unfolding, one paw print, one footstep, one second chance at a time. Dawn arrives like the turning of a page, clean, unmarred, promising. Aaron stands at the edge of Riverside Park's open field, sneakers rooted in spring grass, heart beating quick but sure. No crutch, no fear. Just her and Rox. Beside her, the German shepherd quivers, not in anxiety, but anticipation. His new brass tag glints in the morning sun. Rox, guardian of Aaron. She places a hand on his head. "Let's show the world what freedom looks like." At the toll of the church bell, they run. The first strides are cautious, heel-toe, breath in, exhale. But then momentum catches. Rox keeps pace, his paws finding rhythm with hers, his presence a living metronome of trust. They blur past the oak she once feared, past the invisible line where limits used to live. The world becomes motion and heartbeat, laughter ripped from her lungs like joy on fire. They crest a hill. Sun ignites the dew below into a field of stars. Aaron pushes harder. Rox surges, not leading, but daring her to chase possibility. By the time they reach the weather-worn goal post at the far end, her cheeks are wet, lungs burning, but the ache feels like triumph. She stumbles to a halt, laughter breaking with the sunrise. Rox spins back, tail wagging, pressing his head into her hand. A stranger jogger jogs up, awestruck. "Kid," he says, "that was beautiful. Looked like freedom." Aaron smiles, breathless. It was. Back on Sycamore Street, the news spreads faster than the sunrise. So when Aaron and Rox turn the corner, they're greeted by applause. Neighbors line the sidewalks, clapping, nodding, misty-eyed. Grandma weaves through the crowd, apron still dusted with flour, arms wide. Aaron melts into her embrace. Rox presses against her side protector, now also honored guest. A bouquet of wild flowers appears. Children gather to touch the brass tags on Rox's collar. One whispers, "That means hero in dog language." Another adds, "She's one too." Even Cody steps forward, basketball tucked under one arm. "Race me tomorrow?" he asks. She studies his face. No teasing, only a quiet offering. "Fair start," she agrees. Later, Mr. Alvarez invites her to lead the school's fun run. "Think you and Rox can set the pace?" "We'll set it high," she says. Rox's tail thumps approval. Daniel Hale watches from the back, hands in his pockets. When Aaron catches his eye, she mouths, "We did it." He mouths back, "You did." And Rox, standing tall with his clover crown and Leo's badge still clinking, offers Daniel a solemn nod, a salute between soldiers. That evening, Aaron climbs the hill behind town, just her, a folded blanket, and Rox. They settle beneath the white oak, where the stars come closest. The lights of sycamore flicker below. Porch lamps, laughter, a world that once overlooked her, now celebrates her. Aaron pulls out a small ribbon-strung tag, echo-weathered, but kept. "I promised Daniel I'd keep this safe, so Leo's echo still travels with us." Rox noses it gently, then rests his head in her lap, eyes closing with deep trust. "You weren't lost," she whispers. "You were just finding your way to me." His tail taps once in reply. Above, constellations bloom. Aaron finds the shepherd. A shooting star arcs across the sky, blessing, punctuation, promise. She kneels, arms around him. His breathing is steady, anchoring. "You found me when I was hiding," she says, "and we decided not to hide any more." Distant bells chime. Wind rustles the branches. And in that hush, the world holds them, girl and guardian, carved from quiet, stitched together by second chances. This is not an ending, it's a declaration. Here sits home, here runs hope, and here begins whatever comes next, together. In the end, Aaron and Rox remind us that every heartbeat, whether it thuds in a human chest or pads inside a furry guardian, carries a story yearning to connect. German shepherds, with their keen eyes and steadfast loyalty, embody the best of what dogs offer: silent understanding, fearless protection, and a love that measures worth in presence, not perfection. Yet Rox's greatest gift isn't his strength. It's the mirror he holds to human potential. He shows that compassion can coax courage from weakness, that a single act of kindness, a slice of bread, an outstretched hand, can reroute two destinies. Their journey asks us to look twice at strays and at overlooked people alike. Instead of seeing damage, notice possibility. Instead of turning away, lean in. Open doors, open hearts. When we do, broken legs learn to run, and wandering souls find home. May this tale urge us to rescue and be rescued, to celebrate difference, and to cherish the unspoken vows our animals keep. In choosing love over fear, we do more than change a life. We light a path where miracles become ordinary footprints in the grass, each one leading us toward a kinder, braver world.